Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining me on this episode of Sitting Down with Scholars, where I'll be talking to another researcher. And today I'm joined by Deborah. And Deborah, can you start off by telling me about your academic interest?
Thank you so much for having me over, Jordan. Right now, I'm a master's student. I'm finishing my master's in probably 2 months, hopefully. And my research topic is emerging contaminants and how to remove them from water. It can be either by just filtering them out or just oxidizing them, anything in that topic. I've been studying this since about 2019, but in overall, I'm under the umbrella of inorganic chemistry. So I did my undergrad research assistantship, kind of. There is not a specific translation to English from the name we have here in Brazil. Basically, we call scientific initiation, which is a pretty funny name. So I did that. I did my undergrad research dissertation in also that topic, and now my master's. Hopefully, I'll get into that also in my doctorate. But basically, it's all related to inorganic compounds and how they interact with these emergent pollutants. It could be medicine, it could be hormones, it could be any type of molecule that the normal water treatment and the normal waste water treatment can't remove from the water, and we're basically drinking it if we can remove it. So
Things I'm curious of is you were saying because it's inorganic, and then your point about hormones, for most people, they would probably view a hormone as potentially more of an organic. So how do you make the distinction between what is organic and what is inorganic on the technical level?
okay, so inorganic would be anything that either doesn't have any carbons in it. So that is one of the definitions. So a molecule that doesn't have any type of carbon. But there are inorganic molecules that have carbons. So those would be your diamonds or your graphenes, your graphite. So they basically don't come directly from living organisms. Some people like this definition. The definition we basically follow the most in my lab is carbon that doesn't follow exactly those rules of organic chemistry, how they react, and all of that. So it's basically carbon that you can make out of other things that's not a living organism.
The other thing that you said about Deborah was that you're hoping to go into a doctorate. Have you already got a doctorate in mind? Is it something that you're happy to share, that you've already got a plan ironed out, or are you at the process of getting ready to finish your master's, so you're applying for different PhDs or doctoral routes?
So I'm looking into school, so if there's anyone who wants to hire me, I'm open. But I'm looking into schools both in the US and Europe, and mainly schools that focus on environmental chemistry and green chemistry research. That's what I want to do the most. So I'm looking into programs and getting all my things ready, my English tests, everything ready to be able to apply until the end of the cycle. I don't have still a specific school in mind.
Yeah, having now been at the end of my doctoral journey and going for the next stage, I can say the application cycle, that can be a challenge for anyone, but equally it's one of the best experiences, and I would certainly say to most people that doing a PhD is certainly well worth the opportunity. Equally, I know from when we spoke before, you're also working professionally in a field that's broadly speaking similar to what you are interested in, professional perspective and the research perspective. That'd be fair to say.
Yeah, so right now I'm working with wastewater treatment. So I work for the city. We have a wastewater and water treatment facility, and I mean it's really good. It's really fulfilling. It's definitely challenging having to do both study and work at the same time. But I mean, I love it. It's great. It's a bit stinky, but it's great. I also like the part that it feels like I'm making a difference. So that's very nice. I'm basically on the floor doing the job. I'm not. I have a really tiny lab that I work on, but I'm basically there dealing with the like which chemicals to use and how we store the chemicals and how the so I'm more towards the end, so I can see the water being returned to the environment cleaner than it came to us. So it's very nice.
Certainly sounds. But one of the things I'm also interested in more just discussing is when you were saying about the more research assistantship. One of the things that I suppose it sounded more closely associated to a lot of roles in Europe specifically would have been a research assistant role. Obviously, on an undergraduate program, we also have dissertations which are, broadly speaking, sound very similar to yourself. Same with your masters, I'm sure you have a dissertation with that, whereas I know the American undergraduate route is very different to what, by the sounds of it, the European and even the Brazilian system is. But one of the things that I would love to find out more about is what really drove you to follow this particular research interest.
So it's kind of funny because when I first got in university, I didn't really know what I wanted. I kind of wanted to go more towards forensics because at the time in 2017, my main goal was to become a forensics official for the police. So I was thinking about that, and then I took my first hard chemistry class. It would be like introduction to chemistry, but it was a really good professor who is now my advisor. So I'm doing research under him, and I honestly, to be very honest, I'm not the best student in when it comes to like staying in class. So I have ADHD, so it's pretty difficult for me to sit down in class and be like quiet listening to 3 hours of class, which is what we had. So sometimes I would just wander around and just like leave and come back. But I was really good in that subject. So this professor, he was like, "Hey Deborah, I noticed that like you know a lot of things and you had really good grades with me, but I see you have some you're always walking around, you're not very focused." And he had a very honest conversation with me, and he was like, "But I'm looking for students for my lab, and I think it would be a great fit for my lab culture, and also I think you're fairly smart, so I think you would like what we do. So would you like to come to the lab and see how it goes? Stay with us for a semester and see if you like it, what we do and everything." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not? Like I'm here to try new things, so I'll do that." And it's been uh, about 8 years that I'm with him, so it definitely worked out. And it was very nice because then I got the opportunity to receive fellowships to do my work and also get some money out of that, which was pretty nice. And with him, I was able to go to multiple conferences and even got published in as an undergrad. So I think that was the best move I could have done at that time. So it worked out great.
It's been a really rewarding partnership for you, and evidently the professor is obviously very impressed with how you work to have that partnership go as long as it has done. One of the things, and particularly individuals who have an impact on our career, we think about them from how they've inspired us and how they've pushed us down this particular path. Now, that professor sounds like they've done, broadly speaking, a lot of that for you, but I'm quite curious of, have you got any other inspirational figures in your life who you feel have helped you become who you are today?
In the aspect of choosing chemistry, I have one particular that's that's kind of funny. So there's this scientist, his name is Claire Patterson. He was a geochemist, and he was the guy, one of the guys who determined the age of Earth. So they got some samples of meteorites, and one group of research they did based on uranium, and he did based on lead, right? And I watched his episode in Cosmos, the show from the new one with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I thought, oh my god, this man is amazing. He's so cool. What he did is amazing, and how he could determine that the whole atmosphere was full of lead, and that was a big moment for me of like, I could do some really good things if I studied chemistry, because I was going to do math. If it wasn't chemistry, I was on the way to study either math or computer science. And then I watched his episode and I was like, wow, I think I like chemistry better. But I also have some people closer to me. When I was in high school, I was enrolled in a mixed program.
Who inspired you to be who you are today?
So there are a couple main figures in this aspect of inspiration. I had some professors when I did an associate degree back in high school. Almost all my professors were women, and they were all involved in making beer, which is and they're all chemists or chemical engineers. They were pretty influential in how the beer culture was shaped in my city. And I looked at that and I was like, that's so cool. They're so knowledgeable. They know the theory, and they also are very hands-on on everything. And I was like, these ladies are badass. I want to be like them one day. So that mainly pushed me in the scientific career. And when it specifically took chemistry, it was Claire Patterson, the guy who determined the age of Earth. I was watching Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and there's one episode where they show how Claire Patterson could determine the age of Earth and how everything was full of lead, the atmosphere, the water, and everything. And I was like, so chemistry if I study chemistry, I could do some pretty nice things. And I was like, okay, I want to study chemistry now. I'm not going to study computer science or mathematics. I'm doing chemistry.
They will think of the big names, like you say, the Neil deGrasse Tysons and so on, and getting that inspiration to pursue something because they're really interested in a subject or an individual that they've seen. But it's really interesting for you to say that a lot of the representation you had early on was from female scientists and researchers and professionals, because in a lot of cases, particularly in STEM, that's more the exception, I would say, rather than the norm. The representation is not normally that strong. And particularly, I would say, in chemistry and physics, it's more typically biology within the sciences. Well, yeah, but like you say, potentially more of an abstract figure of someone to aim towards. And I'm sure, similar to myself, when the further you go in your academic career, there will be people that you certainly look up to. I know there were scientists that I was not aware of. Now I'm aware of far more, because these are individuals that you not only hear about, they're individuals that you meet or that you hear talking, and that becomes a far different environment than, oh yeah, I read about X in a textbook.
Yeah, and when it's women, it's usually Marie Curie. But she's great. She's a great inspiration. I would love to reach her level one day. I don't know if I can, but that's usually who you hear the most when you say like chemistry and everyone's or physics and everyone thinks about her. But by all means, she's great, and she's definitely part of the people who inspired me as well.
Yeah, a bit of a culture shock, I think is probably the best word, or a bit of a shock that you can, like you say, you're at the same event as. I always think it's always quite surprising that when you talk, you're potentially talking to or asking questions of, it's a real full circle moment when you've said, I've read what you've done. Now I'm really interested about what you think of this, and potentially they might even ask a question of yourself.
Yeah, it's that's a really funny thing that you said, because there are some people that during my research I would read their papers, especially the Brazilian ones, and I'd be like, oh, this person, they must be so cool. They look, they're so smart. And then you go to conferences and you meet them. It's like, wow, I'm talking, because you read so many papers and you're like, I know that name, I know that name, and then you see them in real life. It's like, wow, it's really cool.
Yeah, and like you say, I think that's the other thing. Typically, we forget that a lot of these people are also human as well, and as a result, this can be the caveat. They can be great. Their research might be great, really impactful, but they might doesn't necessarily mean that the person the person doesn't necessarily their work might be interesting, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have all the qualities that we particularly want them to have when we interact with them or work with them.
So yeah, it's hopefully it's all good interactions, but unfortunately I've had some bad interactions with people that I read about, and I was like, I was expecting that moment to happen, and then when it happened, it was a bad interaction. So that's kind of awkward sometimes.
But like you say, that shouldn't be the case. But there are cases I've heard from other students that have had similar stories where they've had, oh, this person's supposed to be really great. It's their lab, it's their grant that we want to work on, and then you have almost sibling students who then almost shield the other students so that they don't have to experience that, and that's again.
Yeah, there's one situation that happened with me. So there was this uh, ex professor, and he's very influential in the analytic chemistry circle. Basically, I don't want to be the type of professor that don't really care about their students, that are just worried about like, here's the lesson plan, and then they send you over and that's it. I aspire to be a professor that tries to teach everything I know the best way I can. So at least I can be like, I did my part to contribute to that, for example, that specific class. And more in the more personal aspect, I never really had teachers or professors who were super open and understanding about, like, for example, me having ADHD. And I guess it's never really taught to them how to deal with students who are different. But I mean, I by no means I don't blame them. I don't blame them, but it's something that I see and I look and I'm like, I want to be different. I want to learn how to deal with uh, students' struggles. Of course, it's difficult to do like each one personally, but at least try to be like in a broader way, being like, hey, this is my teaching style, and if anyone has any specific type of struggle, like, you can reach out, we can have like an honest conversation. And if you have more difficult sitting down in class, for example, I'm not going to punish you, like, by all means, just like, uh if you're not affecting other students, I don't know, just walk around, just like go outside, have a coffee, and come back.
Not necessarily the good way of taking that forward, and in some cases you can have the fact that that person is tenure tracked, so that person is really safe. They bring in a lot of money for the university, and the university can't or won't get rid of them. But as a result, the people who are under them don't generally necessarily want to be, but they have to be because that's the only way they're going to progress their career. And from a UK and most of Europe perspective, we don't necessarily have exams. There are increasingly changing entry requirements for lectureships and professorships who are tenured. Tenured position is generally someone who is, like you say, unfireable for whatever reason. But the challenge that I would say we typically see is an individual can either go into that position in a teaching focused university, because in the UK, universities are largely private, so they're not connected to the state at all. But one of the challenges that we have as a result of that is, if that you go into a teaching focused university, you can just apply for a job like it's a job, and you potentially progress up through those various positions. So lectureship, professorship, become a reader, etc., and you go that way. Or you have the approach where you become, let's say your experience is, okay, I'm going to do X amount of research fellowships, do X amount of research grants, and so on. Eventually, going down the research pathway, I will then get brought on as a senior fellow or senior researcher, and then that will be my way into a tenured position where I then become a professor and so on. And again, that's more based on how much funding that individual has brought in and been able to show that they consistently can do that. So yeah, there are different checks and balances that are being brought in. So teaching qualifications, research grants, publications, but it varies based on institutions more so than by system, especially in the UK, I would say.
So here, there's a more centralized system. All universities, for you to become a professor, you need to do an exam to be accepted. So we call concursos, right? And then there's two main ways to get funding, from the government and from private/public deals. In chemistry, usually chemistry, physics, math, all the hard sciences, unless you have a very specific marketable research, so something that's almost the end product, most of your funding is coming from the federal, because private companies are usually more interested in things that they can profit from, right? So that would be the engineerings. And engineers here, they have a lot of private funding because they can develop products faster. And honestly, that's not even our goal. For example, my lab, we're not interested in developing any type of products. We're more interested in developing the field, basically, for then eventually someone else make a product out of it. So when you secure a position as a professor in the university, you don't necessarily have to like have funding or bring funding with you, but the main thing you have to do is teach. Research, it depends on each program, and you can get away with getting funding with other people. So usually they do like groups of professors request for funding together, and then they share the resources they get. So we have resources from the federal government and from the state. Usually the federal grants are better, but the state is trying to catch up. So and most of the scholarships and fellowships for the students are also from the government, which is, I guess, it's kind of nice because you know how many scholarships each program have, so you kind of know beforehand if you're gonna have a scholarship or not. But it comes with problems as well, so it gets kind of deep into like how each government treats and takes seriously scientific development. So that's a different conversation.
I suppose so. One of the other things I know the humanities aren't your area of focus, but one of the things that I'd imagine is quite a different side of it is I would presume that funding, therefore, for the humanities would be vastly different or more difficult than science, engineering, mathematics, computer science in your university system because of, like you say, if it's very much federal funded, and as a result, I can't see a government necessarily investing as much in the humanities for one reason or another.
The funding for the research is definitely more difficult, but it still exists because there is some minimum requirements of how much uh, it should be invested in each area. So we have in the federal government, we have an agency that have oversight of the research that's being done in the country. So a way they found to make things more fair was they divided in areas. So it'd be like science of the earth, that would your hard science, your chemistry, math, physics, biology, engineers, health sciences, and humanities. So they set a minimum requirement that each area needs for funding, but the humanities are lower. But also because a lot of research being done here in humanities, it doesn't need as much money because they're just like it's mostly researching in books and computer stuff. So I mean, they need money for the students for the scholarships, but not as much for like we need to buy everything for the lab. So
It's more of a. It's just interesting to see from how the perspectives not necessarily differ, but how there is the challenges for academia in different countries, and it just struck me. It's good to hear that there's some form of funding for either way, so it's not just one versus the other. But yeah, it's interesting to see that there is a range of potential different options that are there. So, but yeah, in terms of one of the areas that I suppose this is more, what do you hope will be the impact of your research area? So, the area or topic that you're interested in, what do you hope to achieve within your career, either personally or professionally?
so ideally, I'd hope to try to make a change in how we see uh, water treatment and wastewater treatment, and not not exactly how we see it, but like the necessities of it, and for people and managers and governments to see that there are new challenges because we have a lot of medications being consumed. We have a lot of things that in the past, when all these systems were created, we either didn't know about them or we didn't have these problems at all, like the overconsumption of medication. So I'd hope to make them to see that there are new challenges and there's a new horizon of how we should do things because it's gonna impact people's health, not only people's but also the environment. Uh, on my research, I see a lot of impact in fish populations, frog populations, and things like that because of how much drugs in general. It could be either medication drugs and also drugs that are in the water, and animals are suffering with that. So ideally, I would hope to at least try to implement these new types of treatments in at least one place to show all the other places. Like, this is how we're doing, and this is how you're supposed to do now. So let's all get better. For my doctorate, my main goal is to because the chemistry part, like, it's pretty under I understand pretty well at this point, but my main goal for my PhD is to make it bigger. So everything I do is at bench scale, so 25 milliliters and everything really small. So ideally for my PhD, I would like to make everything bigger. So try to use exclusively sunlight now, and like do bigger batches and try to do more the engineering part of the process of like how could we implement this in a real system, because my degree is actually industrial chemistry, so I had quite a bit of engineering as well in school. So the chemistry part is fine. We understand the mechanism. We understand how we're supposed to do things. Now I want to see how we're supposed to do things engineering wise. How can I?
Especially what sounds quite interesting. I know from the fact that although, like you're saying, your focus at the moment is in chemistry, it's quite interesting that a lot of the application could also see you potentially take a pivot into biochemistry or biological sciences because, as you say, it impacts the animals, the plants, and equally how we use medication. So quite interdisciplinary side of your subject as well.
I guess everything. I know it's a not the greatest answer, but I'm a very curious person overall. So just being able to study something and the feeling of being like, oh, that's so cool. I'm at this point, I'm the only person that knows this specific mechanism, or how this specific material works. I think that's all very exciting for me, especially this all these eureka moments of being like, for example, when I first started with my compounds, I work with Prussian blue analogs. So my some people call MOFs metal organic frameworks, but we rather call them uh, coordination compounds with mixed valence. So just being like, how can I make this material? And there's not a whole bunch of literature in the topic of the making of some of them, and the feeling of being like, oh, I'm not perfected, but I optimized a method of making this material, and now I can characterize. I can do like microscopies. I can do uh, infrared spectroscopy and all of that. Just the feeling of being like, I made this thing and I know how it works. I know all the details, all the each little detail of how each bond is in this material, and I'm the first person to know about this. I feel that everything, all these things are very exciting and I love it. But also it's I like that's a challenging area that mixes everything basically. So in my work, I do a bit of organic chemistry, I do a bit of analytic chemistry, I do a bit of inorganic and quantum chemistry. So just the interdisciplinarity, is that right? So just the mixing of everything, I feel that's what excites me the most, of being able to be like, I know a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
No, I definitely think as someone who's got a biology and humanities mix currently, I can definitely see the interdisciplinary element that is really exciting because you get to play around in so many different fields and meet so many different interesting people from various different areas of interest, and you can be a bit of a jack of all trades. But which is always a good thing to, which I personally think is always a good thing to have under your belt. It makes you less pigeonholed in. Equally, your PhD, what you potentially decide to do, and post PhD when you decide to go into whatever, it gives you more flexibility, which is always a good thing. But Deborah, at this point in the conversation, I just want to pivot into a little segment that is telling your story in 10 words or less. So please, by all means, take as long as you need in these various questions, but they are quick fire questions, but try to keep your points to 10 words and or fewer, and we'll see how you take them. So first of all, what did you want to be when you were younger?
I wanted to be a model in New York City and a ballerina.
How do you want people to see you today?
Hardworking and curious. I have only 2 words for that.
And can you describe your field or your area of research?
Oh, I have a good one. Colorful powders to make clean water.
What is the biggest challenge in your field today?
Funding and interest from the private sector into bringing that research to real life applications in their water treatment systems.
And the last question, what is a surprising fact about yourself that most people wouldn't be aware of?
I'm obsessed with cars, and I'm also really good at fighting in martial arts in general. So I do jujitsu and MMA.
5 quick fire questions for telling your story in 10 words or less. And one of the things that I want, and the next thing that I want us to discuss is, what do you want your legacy to be, whether that be personally or professionally?
I want people to see that if you're in academia, you're not necessarily a certain way, that especially when it comes to disability. I don't necessarily love this word, but like as a person with ADHD, for example, I would like people to see that you don't have to be that perfect student, that straight A students in undergrad and then straight A students like in the rest of your life, and 100% focus on your research type of thing to succeed in academia and to do good things in academia, to have a good research, that you can do different things. You can fight jiu-jitsu, you can do things in your personal life, and not being obsessed 100% of your time with your research. So people are less afraid of starting into this path, because I see a lot of people, especially when I was helping. There's a part of the master's here that you have to do some teaching. So undergrad students would be like, I don't know if I can do that. I'm not a straight A student, and I wanted, from what I could achieve in my career, I would like people to see like you don't have to be a straight A student to be good in academia, to be a good researcher. You can have ADHD and be a good researcher. You can have personal interests, you can have hobbies and be a good researcher. So I feel like that's mainly that, so people can look up and see someone who's not afraid to talk about the struggles. Because there, I know I'm there and you're there. I bet you can see there's a lot of people who struggle a lot and they don't talk about it. They don't let other people see they struggle. And I try to do different in this aspect. I'm very open about my struggles. That sometimes I can just sit down and read a paper. I need to walk around. I need to do other things.
It's interesting, like you say, because I was speaking to Liz in the previous episode, and she was saying very similar about wanting to talk more about the things that make us different, and the things that often are viewed as negative connotations, that you have to have a PhD to do this area of research or this area of work. Neurotypical people are the only ones who could potentially do it, and those types of elements. And it's interesting to see, again, multiple people from different episodes supporting each other's perspectives, in terms of from Liz's own experience and from my own experience being a neurodiverse student with dyspraxia. So I can certainly see the highlighting our personal stories is very useful for individuals who might second guess where they can go without seeing someone else doing it, not necessarily being the first to do it, but without seeing people at different stages doing it, which I think is if legacy is what you hope to give, how is your heritage shaped where you've started? And that's not you necessarily as individual, personal perspective. It could be academically, so how you've been taught by different people.
In the teaching aspect, there were a couple of professors that definitely really shaped, both in a good way and in a bad way, how I want to be. So my ultimate goal is become a professor as well and doing research in a university and also teaching. I had professors that were great professors, and I really aspire to be like them because they care about their students, they care about how they're teaching, and they take time to be like, how am I going to plan this lesson for my students to take the best out of it. And I also had the negative side of professors who basically don't really care. I don't want to say that's because they're mean people. Maybe just they never learn how to properly teach. It can happen sometimes. So there are some experience that I took from them, as in the sense of I don't want to be like that.
You built a picture of there was how really well in terms of how, as future professors, lecturers, researchers, we shape the next generation's experience. So I suppose with that in mind, and in terms of the advice that you're already giving in that, what would be your advice for someone who is just starting out on their academic journey? I'll let you pick wherever you want to position that. So it could be advice that's relevant for university, college, school. But what advice would you give to a future student?
So I would say something that I would love to hear when I just started undergrad, so when I just started in university, which is be honest with yourself if you have any struggles. You can try to hide from other people, but it's only going to hurt yourself. So it's better to try to assess like what's happening. Uh, I lost structure in this transition from high school to university. You lose a lot of structure. Like you don't have exact times to be in class and to leave. Like, you're much more free. You're an adult now. So if you're having struggles with this transition, try to be honest with yourself and stop, think about it, and be like, where am I struggling the most? And reach out for someone. It could be a professor that you think would be open, or the disabilities center in your school or something like that. Don't just like try to move on and never touch into that, because that's what I did, and that definitely hurt me and hurt my grades, hurt my career, and also my own personal development. So basically, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are some people who are gonna judge you, but well, there's nothing you can do about that. But try to find people who are willing to help you.
Deborah, thank you very much again for taking the time to sit down with me and join me on this episode of St. Noah's Scholars. And all the best of luck with the PhD job hunt.